We begin with breaking news. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland has announced she is resigning from cabinet. Freeland, who also serves as the federal finance minister, confirmed the news in a letter she posted to social media this morning. Freeland has confirmed she plans to seek re-election in her Toronto riding of University Rosedale.
There's a real disconnect between Minister Freeland or former Minister Freeland and Prime Minister Trudeau about how the economy needs to be managed right now and trying to balance the political imperatives and the fact that this government appears to be headed for defeat whenever that election comes.
Freeland was set to deliver the government's fall economic update this afternoon in a matter of hours, but it's unclear at this point if she will present the document in the House of Commons. That would be quite unlikely given these surprising circumstances. Some of Freeland's cabinet colleagues reacted to her sudden resignation this morning.
Chrystia Freeland is a good friend, someone I work with very, very closely as president of the Treasury Board and Minister of Transport. This news has hit me really hard, and I'll reserve further comment until I have time to process it.
Not just I wish her all the best. Look, these are difficult and deeply personal decisions, and obviously she's made that decision, and I respect her for it.
And the Trudeau cabinet has been meeting. Freeland says for the past several weeks, she and the Prime Minister have been at odds about the best path forward for our country. She noted Justin Trudeau offered her another role in cabinet on Friday, but Freeland felt that the only, quote, honest and viable path is to leave cabinet. We will be following this story and bring you updates as they happen.
Members are very frustrated. It is a disgust that what the government did. They took away our right to strike.
We're just now at a point where we're happy to be, welcoming our employees back to work as we move through a new process where hopefully we can reach negotiated settlements.
Mail will be moving again starting tomorrow as the Canada Post employees return to work for the first time in more than a month. Good afternoon. The Canada Industrial Relations Board has ordered Canada Post employees back to work under their existing contracts. The
contracts have been extended until May to allow time for the bargaining process to resume. CTV's Mike Walker has been following this story and joins us live with more. A lot of people have been waiting for this, Mike.
That's right, Michelle and Nathan. A lot of people have been waiting for this move. It was anticipated to happen, but striking postal workers and their union are voicing their frustration. They came to Chrystia Freeland's office here on College Street to denounce the move.
Good workers, united, will never be defeated.
Hundreds of striking postal workers from across the GTA rallying outside Freeland's office for just over an hour this morning. They were joined by other union groups calling for negotiations to continue between Canada Post and the union without government intervention. Many here say the back-to-work order feels orchestrated and argue it's an attack on their rights. It was on Friday that the Labour Minister called on the Industrial Relations Board to review the negotiations, and late yesterday the board declared talks are at an impasse and issued the order. That means the current contract has been extended until May 22nd. As you mentioned, to give both sides more time to talk. In the meantime, Canada Post says it has agreed to implement a 5% wage increase that is retroactive to when this current contract had expired. Here's more from the union and its members, as well as a spokesperson for Canada Post.
We are disgusted that we've been toyed with for the last month, and that in closing on Friday, they did what Canada Post wanted to do.
Being legislated back or being forced back is always a bitter pill. To come back after being sitting at a table or being out for this long and being forced to take something less.
We are seeing these governments who claim to be worker friendly actually overstepping and interfering with the right to collective bargaining. And so what we're saying is we need to be negotiating, we need to be legislating. This was a very poor move made by the Labour Minister. It really needs to be, it needs to be withdrawn.
We negotiated for over a year, and we're just now at a point where we're happy to be, welcoming our employees back to work as we move through a new process where hopefully we can reach negotiated settlements.
Now, operations are set to resume at 8 tomorrow morning, but there are still questions swirling about whether that will actually happen. Local union leaders tell me they are still waiting for direction from their national union reps who are currently reviewing the order. Reporting live, I'm Mike Walker. Michelle, back to you.
Thank you, Mike. Premier Doug Ford is hosting his counterparts from across the country in Mississauga today.
A number of issues will be up for discussion, with a particular focus on potential responses to U.S. tariff threats. CTV's Queen's Park Bureau Chief Siobhan Morris has been following the meeting and joins us with more. And Siobhan, I'm sure the main topic of conversation is Chrystia Freeland's stunning announcement.
That really has shifted things. I mean, the premiers were prepared to talk about health care, the border, the threat of tariffs under the new U.S. president. But that news of Chrystia Freeland's departure has really thrown a big surprise into this meeting. This was a regular scheduled conference between all of Canada's premiers from across all the territories and provinces. But we do know that the ground is shifting in terms of Canada's relationship with the U.S., with President Trump taking office in January. And now with Chrystia Freeland's departure, things will be a little different between territorial and provincial leaders and its relationship with the federal government. Remember, Chrystia Freeland, of course, was the deputy prime minister as well. Premier Doug Ford has talked often about how close a relationship he has with Freeland, but today he says he didn't have a heads up that she was on her way out.
Premier, you must be concerned about the resignation of Chrystia Freeland today.
Well, I think we all are, but again, this is a time for the premiers to step up, which we're going to, and project unity across the country. And again, we have great premiers, all different locations from coast to coast to coast. And I'm blessed to be chair and have a great team right there with us.
We'll hear a little bit more from premiers at a news conference at 2 o'clock. Doug Ford did also reveal that all the premiers are planning to head to Washington, D.C. to speak with United Voice at the end of February. Reporting live from Mississauga, I'm Siobhan Morris. Nathan and Michelle, back to you.
Thank you, Siobhan. Well, a man is dead and another man has been charged in connection with the stabbing at a Hamilton bar yesterday. Officers were called to Peddle's Tavern on Barton Street East shortly before 2 a.m. yesterday. Police say 34-year-old Shah Ghafouri was stabbed. He was rushed to hospital where he later died. 28-year-old Pierce Herod of St. Catharines was arrested at the scene. He's been charged with second-degree murder.
At this time, it appears the victim and suspect were not known to each other, and the attack was unprovoked. Our sincerest condolences go out to Shah's family during this incredibly difficult time.
This is the second violent incident to happen at the same bar this year. In August, two men in their 20s were shot in the bar's parking lot.
Several people were taken to hospital following a two-vehicle crash in Vaughan yesterday evening. York Regional Police responding to the area of Jane Street and Otto Vaughan Drive shortly before 5:30 p.m. for a crash between an SUV and a pickup truck. One person was taken to hospital in serious condition, while multiple other people suffered minor injuries. The cause of this crash is under investigation. And a child was sent to hospital last night after being struck by a vehicle in the West End. This happened in the area of Weston Road and Wright Avenue around 4 p.m. The child was taken to hospital with serious but non-life-threatening injuries. The driver involved remained on scene. The circumstances leading to this child being struck are still under investigation. Peel Police are joining an initiative aimed at increasing the number of women in recruit classes.
The 30 by 30 initiative aims to have women make up 30% of recruit classes by the year 2030. CTV's John Musselman's been following this story and joins us live with more details. John.
Well, Nathan, the chief here says it's very important for the officers here to reflect the community. That's what part of this news conference was about today. We'll show you some video. Again, this is the 30 by 30 initiative, as you mentioned. They want to have 30% of women recruits by 2030, so that's with about 6 years' time. We heard from some veteran officers, including a SEDAF inspector, who says that when she started 35 years ago, she was the only woman on her shift. When she went into the tactical unit, she also talked to us about the fact that there was no change room for a woman in that unit, so she was changing in a storage room. This is how far police departments have come, but as the chief says, they need to come much farther. And we did speak to a young recruit who grew up in Brampton. She went to North Park Secondary School, then Wilfrid Laurier University. She has now decided to join the police force, and she says it's a great decision that she's made. Here's what people had to tell us just a short time ago.
I would say take it. Take the time to learn and do your research, especially, and try it out. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to try something new because you might end up loving it. I thought law my entire life, so I'm happy to be here, and it's definitely I'm happy. I'm happy where I'm at. So I definitely encourage them to just get out there and try something new.
Today, John, is about being intentional in our recruiting strategies and the way we change the look and feel of the organization and making sure that we commit to making sure the numbers are right by 2030.
The numbers right now in Peel are about 22% women. They want to get that again to 30% within the next 6 years. Reporting live, I'm John Musselman. I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, John. The city's broken ground on a new affordable housing project in Parkdale. The supportive homes will eventually house 42 people at 11 Brock Avenue. The units will be offered as rent-geared-to-income homes with no tenant paying more than 30% of their income or the shelter allowance of their social assistance. Tenants will also have access to a range of wraparound support services to improve their housing stability, health, and well-being.
We know we have a housing and homelessness crisis. That's a direct result of many decades, so 3 decades of government, all levels of government, of not building housing. All that is changed. The City of Toronto is back in the business of building housing because we must.
The development is set to be completed early in 2026.
We return now to our top story. Chrystia Freeland has resigned from cabinet. She confirmed the news in a letter posted to social media this morning, catching many by surprise on the day the fall economic statement is set to be delivered. Freeland says she plans to seek re-election in her Toronto riding of University Rosedale. For more, we're joined live by CTV's Colton Prale in Ottawa. Colton, help us better understand this move and the impact on the Trudeau government.
Yeah, Michelle, I mean, this is a significant move already on a day where you had a cabinet minister, and an important cabinet minister in Sean Fraser, announcing his resignation. This sudden resignation of Chrystia Freeland, the unexpected resignation of Chrystia Freeland, is incredibly significant. Not only was this a big day for government, this was supposed to be a major day for the finance minister, who was going to be delivering the fall economic statement at 4 o'clock. That's not happening at this point in time. It's still up in the air whether or not we're going to get a fall economic statement today. And if we do, we don't know who's going to be the one to deliver it. This is a very significant wrench just in the machinations of this government. But if you look at the letter itself, it could not be more of a considered and direct shot across the bow at Justin Trudeau, including the fact that Chrystia Freeland is resigning from cabinet, but unlike Fraser, choosing to run for re-election in the next election. That is incredibly significant, and it signifies that she has not lost faith in the party, but she may have lost faith in its leader.
Now, it sounds very loud where you are over there. No word at this point from the Prime Minister. What's happening with his cabinet, and what can the Prime Minister come out and say in a situation like this?
I mean, if you can find a messaging for the PM that gets him out of this mess, certainly there's a ton of money to be made on Parliament Hill. This is not an easy one to work your way out of. We've seen a number of cabinet ministers leaving the meeting early today, coming out, and the questions to them have been met mostly with silence. Questions about whether or not you support the Prime Minister, whether or not he should stay on as leader. We didn't hear an answer from Minister Hussein. We didn't get any words from Minister Reshi Valdez. From Dominic Wilkinson, he would not say if he supports the PM. He did say he's not saying it's time for the Prime Minister to step down, but still wouldn't support him openly. This is repeated over and over again. The only cabinet minister that we did hear outright support from was Lawrence Macaulay, the agriculture minister, who on his way into the House of Commons earlier today was asked, does cabinet support the PM? And he said, well, let's say I do, which is not a ringing endorsement of cabinet unity. It is a single cabinet minister suggesting that he still supports the Prime Minister. So that's the situation today. There is immense disharmony in this cabinet. And you look at just the number of senior ministers who have left. Randy Boissonnault is out. Fraser is out. Freeland is out. Marie-Claude Bibeau left a couple of weeks ago. You're missing Dan Vandal. You're missing Pablo Rodriguez, the former Quebec lieutenant. The list goes on and on and on. You know, these are very significant cabinet members who have left, and the shuffle, whenever it comes, is going to need to be significant, and will be very telling who the Prime Minister promotes into his cabinet.
From a very practical standpoint, there's a fall economic statement that has to get tabled, and there are reporters, I would imagine, who are supposed to be in lockup. Behind the scenes, any indication there? I mean, I imagine the markets are waiting, and this document's been finalized. So what do you think happens there?
As far as at least 30 minutes ago, the blankets were still over the fall economic statement. They were supposed to be in lockup. They were supposed to be in the midst of poring over these documents. And as of a few moments ago, they still haven't seen these documents. The question of whether or not it's even going to come today is still up in the air. And if it does, who's going to talk about it? We still don't know. We haven't heard an answer from the Finance Department. We haven't heard an answer from the Prime Minister's office. We know the former press secretary for the press secretary for the former Finance Minister is not answering questions. They're directing them to PMO and to Finance. And so the situation is still very much up in the air. And at this point, finance officials who are in that lockup don't have an answer as to when the reporters there will be able to see these documents. But at this point in time, they haven't.
Well, I know it's a busy day for you out there. We'll let you get back to it. Also, we got the holidays next week, so it's an interesting time of year to have all of this unfolding out of Ottawa. CTV's Colton Prale, we appreciate your time.
Anytime.
Well, Federal Housing Minister Sean Fraser also announced he'll be leaving his post and will not be seeking re-election. Fraser says he's stepping away from federal politics for family reasons. He is reportedly considering a run for the leadership of the Nova Scotia Liberal Party. Fraser spoke about his decision this morning.
Today is a decision that I've made for personal reasons because my kids aren't getting any younger and they deserve to have their dad around. I am going to remain engaged in politics in what capacity time will tell. I will remain open to different professional opportunities over the course of the next number of years, but for now the focus is on the people who are closest to me.
Including Fraser, there are a total of 6 cabinet ministers who've announced they will not be running again for the federal Liberals.
We'll have more news in a moment, but first, let's take a moment to take a live look at the weather this afternoon. Certainly a gray day, although it is mild this start to the week. We are expecting some unsettled weather this afternoon. Definitely a bit more comfortable, but there's a wetness out there.
There is. It's that damp, cool feeling. And this system is part of a larger one that isn't bringing a ton of snow to northern Ontario. For us here in southern Ontario, this is falling strictly as rain. We have winds picking up a little bit out of the southeast this afternoon, but for the most part, it is relatively calm. Still some fog advisories in place out towards Waterloo Region and then north towards Elliott Lake. But for the most part, the GTA is just kind of gray, kind of cool, but still we're sitting above seasonal. Right now, 5 degrees here in the city. We're at 6 through Hamilton, 8 to Niagara, a little cooler out towards Ottawa, but we are holding on at a much more seasonal point. Looking ahead to the end of the week, it is going to be drastically colder. Another sharp cool down, very similar to last week. Coming up, I'll have a full look at your long range forecast. We'll look at that cool down and what it means when it comes to your commutes. But right now, I'll send things back over to Nathan.
Thank you, Jess.
Thanks.
Voters are casting their ballots in another federal by-election today. This one is being held to choose a new MP in the BC riding of Cloverdale-Langley City. The seat was most recently held by a Liberal who quit to run in the provincial election for the NDP. Now, Liberal candidate Madison Fleischer will face Conservative Tamara Jansen, who has held the riding before. The by-election was seen as another test for the Trudeau government, which lost 2 by-elections in recent months. Quebec's healthcare system is facing questions after a Montreal man suffered a fatal brain aneurysm.
He went to hospital with symptoms, but left after waiting for 6 hours in the ER. He died the next day. CTV's Maria Saru reports.
Adam was a wonderful person. He was very funny.
His friends and family are still in shock. On December 5th, 39-year-old Adam Burgoyne went to the emergency room with chest pain, trouble breathing, nausea, and clammy skin. After waiting for more than 6 hours, he decided it wasn't worth it and left. Burgoyne died the next day of an aneurysm. His close friend can't believe Burgoyne is gone.
He was very intelligent. He was really easy company to be around, and he really did well for himself.
Burgoyne had written on X that when health workers made sure he wasn't dying, he was, quote, thrown out into the waiting room for hours. He didn't mention which hospital he was at. Paul Brunet of the Council for the Protection of Patients says Burgoyne should have received faster care.
Take the word emergency off these wards, because unfortunately, unless you're dying right now, I'm not sure you're going to be seen.
Even if wait times are long, patients need to stay put, says ER doctor Greg Clark.
If you feel for whatever reason you cannot stay, communicate with the team. They will be able to, even though they may not agree with your decision to leave, they will be able to guide you on what to watch for and how to do follow-up.
He adds an aneurysm, which is an abnormal swelling of a blood vessel, may be hard to detect. If it ruptures, it can be catastrophic. In a statement sent to CTV, Burgoyne's sister says the family is grieving and wants privacy. They hope that in the near future, testing and imaging for aneurysms will be handled with the same urgency as those for heart attacks. Maria Saru, CTV News.
We return now to one of our top stories. Premier Doug Ford is hosting his counterparts from across the country in Mississauga today. For more on the meeting, we're joined by CTV's Scott Hurst. Scott, the response to U.S. tariffs appear to be top of mind for premiers, but how does the Chrystia Freeland stepping down as finance minister just hours before she was supposed to deliver the financial economic statement, how does that impact the response?
Good afternoon, Nathan. Premier Doug Ford really tried to strike a unifying tone this morning before that news came down, before premiers even knew that Chrystia Freeland was stepping down from cabinet. Since then, that, of course, has become one of the key topics at this meeting. How they work closely with the federal government going forward is now a key question for these premiers as they meet here in Mississauga at a Toronto Airport hotel. Now, when it comes to the tariffs, of course, that still is top of mind and needs to be one of the main topics for these premiers, and trying to come with that unifying tone is what Premier Doug Ford did this morning. Once again, as I mentioned, this is before the news of Chrystia Freeland broke. Premier Ford was out speaking to reporters saying he believes that the premiers are unified, at least unified in identifying that the main priorities are securing the border and ensuring Canada does meet its 2% GDP target, NATO target. And so that is what, at the very least, premiers say that they are unified in. How they get to that approach, how they push back against the incoming Trump administration and the threat of 25% tariffs on all goods from Mexico and Canada. How they get there, that still seems to be, not quite unifying, we should say, because we've been hearing Premier Ford talk about cutting off energy to the U.S. Other provinces aren't so on board with retaliatory tariffs. We've also seen Alberta come out with its own plan to secure its border with the U.S. And so even though there was a unifying tone from the Premier this morning, who is hosting the premiers from across the country in Ontario, how they get to that point may still be up for discussion, and that is still the dominating issue at this meeting, obviously with the news of Chrystia Freeland coming soon after that. Here's more from Premier Doug Ford this morning, commenting on what premiers need to focus on. Of course, this all took place before the news broke of Chrystia Freeland stepping down. Here's what he had to say.
We have a lot to offer. Every single territory and every single province has a tremendous amount to offer to the U.S., no matter if it's Alberta's oil or Saskatchewan's uranium or manufacturing here in Ontario, our critical minerals here in Ontario, our energy here, electricity here in Ontario, Quebec aluminum, their critical minerals as well. So everyone is coming to the table with something.
So, Nathan, of course, each province has its own vested interest when it comes to pushing back against the Trump administration. But he did say that there is a need to come to a unified tone amongst the premiers and then go to Ottawa with that unified tone as well. Of course, lots of questions about how they work with Ottawa right now. But one of the other messages that Premier Ford says he wants to get out is that he wants this unifying message from premiers not just to reverberate in Ottawa or Washington, but also to CEOs on both sides of the border, because of course he reiterated once again that this threat of tariffs against Canada won't just be incredibly harmful to our economy, but he once again said this will be incredibly harmful to the American economy. So the message coming out of this premiers meeting isn't just for Justin Trudeau, isn't just for the incoming Trump administration, but also for CEOs on both sides of the border, Nathan.
All right, CTV's Scott Hurst on the premiers meetings. Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan.
In the Middle East, the Gaza Health Ministry says more than 45,000 people have now been killed since Israel began its military offensive in the Palestinian territory. The ministry reports over 50 casualties were brought to hospitals in the past 24 hours. Officials do not distinguish between civilians and combatants in their count. Elsewhere, ceasefire negotiations may be gaining ground again. Mediators from Qatar, Egypt, and the U.S. have said there appears to be more willingness from both sides.
New details are emerging about the ouster of Bashar al-Assad from Syria. A statement posted on the Syrian presidency Telegram channel states Assad did not plan on leaving Syria until rebels encircled the capital of Damascus on the morning of December 8th. Assad reportedly left the capital and went to a Russian base before being evacuated to Moscow that same day. It's not clear if the account is owned by Assad.
France has rushed rescue crews and supplies to its tiny Indian Ocean territory of Mayotte. The island group was struck by its worst cyclone in nearly a century. Authorities fear hundreds and possibly thousands of people have died. Residents searched for water and shelter after the storm hit Saturday. Schools, hospitals, restaurants, and government offices have been left in ruins. Electricity was out throughout the islands, with only the capital spared. Jess.
Well, it's a mild start to the work and school week here in the city as we tiptoe towards the holiday season. But we have rain on the way with a system that is going to kind of span the entire province. But for us here in Southern Ontario, it is falling as rain. A gusty wind this afternoon, but it's short-lived and it does let up as we head into that second half of our day. But the rain is sticking around. Coming up, I'll have a full look at your long-range forecast, including a trend towards much cooler temperatures before the week is all said and done, plus the chance of flurries. That's all coming up after the break.
All right, to the forecast. I mean, compared to what we had, I guess, over the weekend, especially Friday, this is kind of like a warm-up.
A warm-up, but it's not as fun when it's wet and soggy, and, you know, you still kind of get chilled out there, even though it is mild for this time of year, because you're just feeling wet all the time.
Listen, I've had a hard time figuring out what to wear over the past couple of weeks because it goes from 7 degrees down to wind chills of -20, and we have that once again this week. So we go from well above seasonal for today. As we get in towards the end of the weekend, we're looking at wind chill values in Southern Ontario, in the GTA, in that -20 range. So this is just your heads up to pack for quite literally everything. Weather is brought to you by the Presler Law Firm. Injury lawyers you don't pay unless they win. Now, it's a mild start to the day. It almost, if you squint a little bit, looks a little bit more like spring than it does winter. And we have the meteorological start of the winter season beginning this weekend. And just in time for that, the temperatures are dropping dramatically. But for today, at least to kick things off, we are very mild out there. We're sitting at 5 right now here in the city, 8 through Windsor, Ottawa a little cooler at -1. But Northern Ontario, shout out to Sault Ste. Marie, you're at 4 degrees right now. It is very mild everywhere. We have this ridge in the jet stream that separates the colder air and the warmer air, and we're benefiting from a southerly flow of the winds and warmer air. We'll see a daytime high of 7. We should just be at 1, just above that freezing mark, and we are nowhere near that throughout the bulk of our day. And almost everybody's sitting on the positive side of things. So if you like the more mild winter weather, we have that and then some as we head throughout at least the beginning of the week. Tonight we'll sit at 3. We should be at -6. So again, it is beneficial if you have outdoor plans or you want to go skating. You don't need all of the extra winter layers, but we are going to see a dramatic twist as we head in towards the end of the week. We are, though, watching this system right now, bringing snow to Northern Ontario and a line of showers heavy at times this evening as we wrap up our Monday. We get a little bit of a break into the day tomorrow, a cloudy break, but a break from the active weather before we see a switch, a drop in temperatures and the chance of flurries. So for the rest of our day today, again, that shower activity comes in late afternoon, just in time for that commute for a lot of people. So this is your heads up to give yourself that extra time. Localized flooding definitely possible, but it's done as we approach about 11 p.m. and then we get into the day tomorrow with just a whole lot of cloud cover. A few light flurries off of Georgian Bay, but for the most part, start to finish, your Tuesday, not so bad. It's as we get into Wednesday, we start to see those flurries start to push their way in, and we're holding on to a much cooler day. So as that comes through and precipitation continues to fall, it falls this time as flurries. But as we get in towards the rest of our week, we really are quite mild. The most seasonal day that we have is going to be on Wednesday, where we have those flurries or kind of that wet snow making its way through. Because we're still kind of hovering just above the freezing mark, we're holding on to it likely being more of a wet snow, at least for the GTA. And then we get into Thursday, This is where our temperatures begin to drop. It's really nice and sunny out there, but it doesn't do much to warm things up with all that sunshine. And then getting into the weekend, we welcome in winter. That -14 overnight will feel into the -20s. Nathan.
All right, thank you, Jess.
Thanks.
The Maple Leafs are looking to avoid a second straight loss when they faced off with the Buffalo Sabres last night.
Rings it around to Marner, chips that for Nyes, picked up by Tavares for the hat trick. John Tavares scores!
John Tavares notched his 14th career hat trick to lead the Leafs to a 5-3 win. The team will be back on the ice Wednesday to take on the Dallas Stars.
The Raptors are looking to snap a 4-game losing skid when they take on the Chicago Bulls tonight.
By Walter. Battle wants it. He's going to fire away. Feet set. Bucket. Good.
The team coming off a 114-104 loss to the Miami Heat on Thursday. Tip-off for tonight's game against the Bulls is set for just after 7:30 at Scotiabank Arena.
Still to come, concerns about a shortage of crucial epilepsy medication. We'll have more on what this means for patients when we come back. All right, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is speaking in Ottawa. Let's listen in live.
Des 40 milliards de dollars imprudents de déficit imprudent annoncés par le gouvernement.
Imprudent dollars announced in the last update in the spring. And we were on the point of learning that the amount was much higher than that. This would have meant greater inflation and a greater risk to our economy, which is already at risk of high tariffs from the United States. In following the chaos, let's remember this. The moment when the Minister of Finance resigned and published on the government website, this would mean that François-Philippe Champagne would, in a moment, become the Minister of Finance. In fact, I think that right now, Minister Philippe Champagne is the Minister of Finance. But a journalist called him, and he confirmed that he is not. So it's not him. Next, the position should go to Randy Boissonnault. Randy Boissonnault is the third on the list of priority that is published by the cabinet of Justin Trudeau. Mr. Boissonnault, the two Randys, had to resign because of a scandal. He claimed false Indigenous identity and identified as two different people to gain access to government funds for his business. That was a massive scandal. So who is the Minister of Finance at this moment? Everything has gotten out of control. Spending and bureaucracy is out of control and has doubled the cost of housing. There are 1,400 houseless encampments that have invaded Ontario alone. Immigration is out of control since the opening of refugee camps outside Canada, and we now face uncontrolled immigration. The government has up to 500,000 people in Canada with irregular or illegal status. Crime is out of control, and it's invading our streets. We are seeing a duplication of gun-related violence, drugs, and disorder. 47,000 people have died from overdoses. This is after Mr. Trudeau liberalized drugs in our streets. Inflation is out of control. This is because of this government's inflationary spending. 2 million people need to visit food banks. This is an unthinkable number just a few years ago. Now food banks have a shortage of food. Uncontrolled spending has doubled our debt and has driven up interest rates. It's not just Ms. Freeland who has lost control. Or Mr. Trudeau. Minister Fraser also resigned in the midst of a housing crisis. The Minister of Finance resigned right in the middle of an economic crisis here in Canada. This goes to show that Justin Trudeau has lost control.
au pouvoir.
However, he's hanging on to power.
Toutes ces divisions,
all this chaos and division and all these weaknesses are occurring at the same time that our largest neighbor is close to imposing tariffs on us of up to 25% under the direction of the recently elected president. This is a man who has been elected and knows how to identify weaknesses, and we see our Liberal government's weaknesses. Mr. Freeland has been the government's primary minister to Justin Trudeau. Not just a minister, but also the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, and she has lost confidence in Mr. Trudeau. Look at her own words. Today, our country faces a big challenge. The new U.S. administration is taking a nationalist economic approach, threatening 25% tariffs. We need to take this threat seriously. We need to maintain our fiscal capacity today. We need to ensure that we have reserves which we might need in case of a tariff war. We need to avoid the costly political tricks that will cost us and have Canadians doubt us. And we do not see how serious this is. I know that Canadians will recognize and respect this approach. They know when we are working for them, and they also know when we are focusing on ourselves. It's unavoidable that our term in government would end. Would end. And I cite. This cannot go on. When will Jagmeet Singh start working for Canada instead of working for Mr. Trudeau? How can it be that Mr. Singh, when there are 20 MPs who have lost confidence in Mr. Trudeau, including his own Deputy Prime Minister, how is it that you, Mr. Singh, still have confidence in this Prime Minister? Mr. Singh now needs to put Canada first. He needs to put an end to this disastrous government that has totally lost control. We are here to work for Canadians, and I have a message for all patriotic Liberals across Canada. I understand your leader, whether it's Mr. Carney or Mr. Trudeau. I understand that they have betrayed you. Conservatives will work for you, for all Canadians of all political stripes. We will work to reunite and help Canada recover after all of the damage caused by Prime Minister Trudeau. We have a beautiful future, but we need to get started now, and we need to start taking back control. We will take back control of spending, of immigration, of our borders, and of crime. In addition, our governance. We will reinstore the promise of Canada. Thank you very much.
Everyone, for being here today. What we are seeing is the government of Canada itself is spiraling out of control right before our eyes and at the very worst time. Today, mere hours before Trudeau's finance minister was to deliver a fall economic update that was expected to smash through her already massive deficit targets, she announced she no longer has confidence in the Prime Minister. Canadians were already anxious about the reckless $40 billion deficit the government had announced last spring. But today, in mere hours, they were expected to learn that it was much higher than that, threatening our social programs and our fiscal stability right in the middle of a potential trade war. The Prime Minister, with the help and instigation of carbon tax Carney, pushed Ms. Freeland to bring on massive, unsustainable, irresponsible spending increases that blew through her self-imposed guardrail. He thought that he would simply push her through that guardrail and off the cliff so that she, and not he and Mr. Carney, would take the blame for the crisis that he and they caused. To continue the chaos, think of this. The moment the finance minister resigned, the government's published order of precedent meant that François-Philippe Champagne instantaneously became the finance minister. But now he tells us he doesn't have the job and doesn't want the job. So it goes to the next minister who's on the published order of precedent, and that is Randy Boissonnault, more commonly known as the two Randys, the gentleman who had to resign because he falsely claimed he was Indigenous, falsely claimed that there were more than one Randy when it was all him and all in his head. And he is now technically our finance minister as we speak. We don't know for sure, though, if he'll still be finance minister in 3.5 hours when the scheduled fall economic update is expected to land. That update, by the way, is currently covered by a black blanket underneath a table. No one is allowed to look at it, even though journalists and parliamentarians showed up to read it in briefing rooms to this day, earlier today. So here we are. Everything is spiraling out of control. Out of control spending and bureaucracy has doubled housing costs, with 1,400 homeless encampments taking over Ontario alone. Out of control immigration has led to refugee camps opening in suburban Canada. And then we have 500,000 people in the country illegally, according to government estimates. Out of control crime overtakes our once tranquil streets, with gun crime having doubled. Out of control drugs and disorder add to the chaos, with 47,000 of our people dead of overdoses since Trudeau legalized drug laws, stopped enforcing them, and allowed limitless sums of fentanyl ingredients into our country. Out of control inflation has followed out of control money printing.
All right, we're listening to Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre speaking in Ottawa, not holding back. He's reacting to the stunning announcement by Chrystia Freeland. He says the government is spiraling out of control at the worst possible time. He calls it chaos. He says we really don't know who the finance minister will be. He says spending is out of control, immigration out of control, crime out of control, inflation, the entire government. And he says Chrystia Freeland has lost confidence in the Trudeau government, and so should NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. And he was referencing the letter posted on social media by Chrystia Freeland explaining why she left and that she disagreed with affordability measures, called them costly, called them gimmicks. And she says that the government needs to take Trump's tariff threats extremely seriously. Of course, we're going to keep on following what Pierre Poilievre has to say throughout the day. You'll get updates on our online at ctvnewstoronto.ca, also at CTV News at 5 and 6. We'll take a short break.
And still to come, what's happening with the Canadian dollar amid all of this? Business News is next. The Canadian dollar held its own this morning, trading near 4-year lows amid the political upheaval in Ottawa.
Andrew Bell of BNN Bloomberg brings us the latest in business.
Hello there. Here are your business headlines. The loonie dipped against the US dollar in morning trading after the shocking resignation of Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, but it later recovered. Freeland said she quit Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's cabinet because of differences over how to prepare for tariff threats by US President-elect Donald Trump. Freeland announced her resignation just hours before she was due to deliver a fiscal and economic update in Parliament. Toronto stocks slipped about 0.5%. America's NASDAQ Composite Index, dominated by big tech stocks, traded at a new record high above 20,000. Shares in Amazon, Google parent Alphabet, and Tesla hit new highs. The Federal Reserve is expected to cut interest rates by 0.25% on Wednesday. And finally, Bitcoin rose to a record high above $106,000 US amid optimism over Trump's support for digital assets. Trump is moving toward creating a friendly regulatory backdrop for digital assets, undoing a crackdown by the outgoing administration of President Joe Biden. That's the latest in business. I'm Andrew Bell of BNN Bloomberg.
Well, an all-new week is upon us. This is prime time for getting yourself set up for the holidays. And how's the weather going to? Will it cooperate a little bit?
A little bit. Tomorrow's probably your best day to get out where we don't have active weather and we're not looking at extremely cold temperatures. So if you still have a few errands you want to run pre-kind of holiday, that last stretch of days, then tomorrow's probably your best bet. It does stay okay into the end of the week, but we are getting very cold. We're watching those showers move in late afternoon, early evening, so it is a soggy second half to your day. Keep that in mind. It will impact your commute home. It is mild, though, 5 degrees and a more southeasterly wind throughout the day. A little gusty this afternoon, but winds do let up just in time for the early part of our evening. But it's warm right across the board. We're sitting well above seasonal as we step into a brand new work and school week. Into our Tuesday. Again, it's a mostly cloudy day. We start to cool down just a little bit, but we're closer to seasonal. The same through Wednesday, but we watch a cold front come through, a change in the winds, and that's what's going to prompt the chance of maybe a wet flurry. Short-lived, though. We get into Thursday, lots of sunshine, but that's where the cool down begins. It gets cold and it stays cold. So keep that in mind. You're going to want to layer up as we head in towards the end of the week.
Good advice. Thank you, Jess. And that is CTV News at noon. Remember, you can get Toronto's breaking news all day long on CP24 and at ctvnewstoronto.ca.
For Jessica Smith and the whole team here, have a wonderful afternoon. I'm Michelle Dubé.
And I'm Nathan Downer. Be sure to join us later for CTV News at 5 and 6. Have a great afternoon.